Welcome to the Betting Above the Rim podcast. Today's date, January 16th, episode 114. Today, let's just jump into tip-off topics. In a trade that went down yesterday, in which Nick Richards was traded from the Charlotte Hornets to the Phoenix Suns for a package that included Josh Okogie and 3 second-round draft picks. And this is a trade, folks, that makes sense for Phoenix. They need a rim protector. They need a lob threat. They need a shot blocker. And someone that doesn't demand the ball a lot of the time, right? Kind of reason why DeAndre Ayton just wasn't going to work with the rest of the guys in Phoenix. Nick Richards gets you about 8.9 points per game and 7.5 rebounds. This is a guy that really does a great job rebounding the ball at a ferocious rate. It really could be a double-double player, as you can see him against Terry Rozier here, protecting the rim, what he does best. And I think it's a really good move for a Phoenix team that really can't make a lot of moves. So how does this set up Phoenix? Well, if you look at their starting lineup, I think now they have more depth. You have Tyus Jones at the point guard position, who is a perfect to play with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker as someone that is a pass-first kind of point guard and wants to get other guys involved. Obviously, you look at Kevin Durant, who continues to play at an extremely high rate, to go along with Devin Booker as that Batman and Robin combination allows them to trade roles. You put Nick Richards in the center position, and then the fifth starting spot should probably stay with Ryan Dunn. The rookie out of Virginia is shooting about 32% from three. I know the three-point shot is not the 3-and-D, what you're looking for, but that's what he is. He's a 3-and-D guy, a guy that can guard multiple positions. So what they've missed since the trade of Mikal Bridges. So, and with him elevating his game, it allowed them to move on from Josh Okogie. So the bench now gets fortified now. Because now you have Bradley Beal. You have Grayson Allen. You have Royce O'Neal. You have Mason Plumlee. You got another player in Iguodaro. So they have set themselves up for a run in which at 19-20, imagine this, they're one game out of under 500, and they're the last place team in their division. Phoenix should be able to make a run here and get into the playoffs. Let's go over to the East, where Knicks star Karl-Anthony Towns missed last night's game versus Philadelphia with a bone chip in his thumb and a sprained thumb. He's listed as day-to-day, according to Ian Begley, my buddy from SNY. Now, this sets up an interesting conversation with New York because when you look at the Knicks, this team has the worst bench production in the league. They have the worst bench numbers in the league. And a guy in Karl-Anthony Towns who is having an absolutely phenomenal year right now, getting you 25.4 points per game to put him 12th, 13.9 rebounds to put him in second, and still shooting the ball 45% from three. This is something that we're going to have to watch out for with New York, because now you got to realize that Mitchell Robinson isn't back yet. Mitchell Robinson, folks, maybe I'm going to say the first or second week of February is what I'm hearing he's going to come back. So now you're down your top two centers. So that means you're going to lean on the play of Jericho Sims and Precious Achiuwa in regards to holding down the center position. I expect Leon Rose to try and make a trade. Does Yusuf Nurkic now make sense for the Knicks? Does Jonas Valanciunas make sense for the Knicks? If you don't think you're going to get Mitchell Robinson back, you're going to need some kind of center position help. And I do think New York is going to make a trade at some point. Karl-Anthony Towns, playing absolutely fantastic basketball, is now out with injury. Let's head to the college game, where one of my favorite teams is hot like fish grease. Houston, who is now starting to play basketball as we expect them to. A Houston Cougars team that relies on their defense You can tell coach is still fighting something. And this is my coaching voice, so this should be natural for you folks listening, because this is the way I sound pretty much the second half of any basketball season. Houston, and if you can pull up that schedule up again, Matt, the thing that's been really great about Houston is they're getting back to their roots. If you pull up the schedule, they've won 9 games in a row. And that's not the big story with Houston. It's what they're giving up. The maximum amount of points they've given up is 57 over those 9 games. And when you think about Houston, you think about their defense and how Kevin Sampson has taught them. They are playing defense at an extremely high level. And if you start to look at the odds, folks, you're now starting to see Houston kind of coming up the board as being one of the favorites to win a championship. They're right now the 4th time with the 4th best odds behind Duke, Auburn, and Iowa State. Another team, Iowa State, looking really good right now. So it sets up for Houston to be what we thought they were. High defensive team with Sharp and LJ Cryer in the backcourt. Does Kelvin Sampson finally cut down the nets? With the way they play defense now, they could score enough that 15-1 bet could be something you may want to take a look at. Let's head to the college game where Paige Beckers is back from a knee injury, scoring 12 points in her first matchup, and UConn's blowout victory at St. John's. And a Paige Beckers, who's the 3rd best odds to win Player of the Year, a Paige Beckers that feel like it's been in college forever. By the way, Paige Beckers has 1 year of eligibility left. People don't know that. She gets a COVID year, and she had, remember folks, and she missed a year for injury. So she's got 1 more year left if she wants to take it next year, which that's a story for another day, because that has to do with a lot with the WNBA and the fact that she doesn't want to go to Dallas. But it sets up an interesting market here for a UConn Huskies team that, producer Matty George and myself are expecting big things. They now have the 2nd best odds, tied with Notre Dame, USC, and UCLA behind South Carolina. Obviously, Watkins has a knee injury, so look out for that injury in regards to how UConn will play. If Beckers and Funk in the gang can stay healthy, you like their chances. Last up, Unrivaled kicks off tomorrow, Friday. And I just want to let people know, obviously with TNT, this is something you want to watch. If you're a fan of women's basketball like I am, it's an opportunity to see these WNBA stars stay home during the winter. It's a 3-on-3 league. It's going to be high-paced, shortened court. Shout out to TNT for backing them. And of course, Brianna Stewart, Nafisha Collier, and the rest of the sponsors that are involved in a league that really has, if you think about it, folks, they have every major WNBA star playing except Caitlin Clark. And I wonder, is that something that's going to affect the ratings of this league? I think so, because Caitlin Clark obviously is the biggest media star in regards to the WNBA. Coming up next, we'll go to our award tour. We'll look at the Detroit Pistons. Can they make a run and make the playoffs? We'll take a look at the the SEC odds to win that league, along with Duke. Can they go undefeated in the ACC? We'll be back with the award tour after this commercial break. Welcome back to Betting Above the Rim Podcast, episode 115. won 14, I should say. And let's get to our award tour. We look at future markets in the NBA and in college, and we're leading off with, I know I'm sick, but I'm not that sick. Will the Detroit Pistons make the playoffs? Right now, the Pistons are a plus 152 to make the playoffs, with a no being at a minus 188. So when you take a look at Detroit, folks, they are sitting right now going 8-2 over their last 10 games. They just had a really good win at New York. I know New York was on the second leg of a back-to-back. But you got to say, J.B. Bickershaft's got to be talked about for Coach of the Year. This is a team that has far exceeded expectations. I think their win total, maybe Matt can figure it out, I think it was maybe like 24, 25 and a half. It was something extremely low. I know it was under 30. So for them, the way that they've played is a testament to what JB has done. You start off with Cade Cunningham, getting you at about 24.5 points per game, 9.4 assists, 6.6 rebounds. Jaden Ivey, who's been hurt. Malik Beasley's been a really good addition, getting you 16.5. You don't think Milwaukee can use that right now? Tobias Harris, still got a bad contract, but I mean, it's less now. Getting you 13.3. Jalen Duren, 9.5, 9.4. So it sets up an interesting argument is do we think they can make it? You got to remember, folks, when you talk about making the playoffs, this is making the final 8. So where do we see this team lining up? If you pull up the NBA standings right now, obviously Cleveland, Boston, New York, all are going to be safe. Okay, they're all going to be safe. Orlando's going to be safe. I just like the job that Jamal Mosley's done. That's, maybe the coach of the year right now. Indiana's played much better. So now we get into this. Milwaukee, I think they should be able to hang on. So now it's Detroit, Atlanta, Miami, Chicago, Philly. I don't count anybody else. 5 teams, 2 spots. I'm going to take a chance on this Detroit team. I think they've started to figure it out. I like the job that they've done. I like the defense that they've played, the maturity they've shown. And I think at plus 152, I'm going to take a chance on this. If this was a plus 120 or plus 125 or anything near even money, I wouldn't touch it. But the fact that I'm getting over $1.50 back for $1 invested, I'm going to take a chance. Detroit to make the playoffs. Let's move on to the college game, where the best league is the SEC. So when Matt and I started talking topics, Matt came up with this idea of the SEC odds. Remember, this is the winner of regular season. And I want people to take a look at this. Auburn minus 165. Tennessee 5-1. Alabama 7-1. Kentucky 8-1. 16-1 for Florida. 24-1 for Ole Miss. 50-1 for Texas A&M. 70-1 for Mississippi State. 100-1 for Missouri, and 200-1 for Georgia. You know why I brought up every team on that list? They're all ranked. They're all ranked. So now when you start looking at it is, I in my right mind can't take this team in Auburn and minus 165, if you pull the odds back up, with Johnny Broom being injured. You can't think that that is the safest bet. So where do you go? Do you go to Tennessee? You go to Kentucky? Do you grab big value? For me, I'm going to go with Alabama. This league, folks, with the leader of the clubhouse in Auburn, and Ole Miss undefeated. And Ole Miss is 24-1. And you got Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky, Missouri with 1 loss, Mississippi State, Florida, Georgia, Vanderbilt, A&M with 2 losses. Good luck figuring this one out. But I'm going to go with Alabama. They're healthy. I love Nate Oates. I don't agree with his philosophy about shooting threes, but I do like 7-1 Alabama to win the SEC regular season title, particularly when they have, I think it's Florida and Auburn down to the last 2 games of the regular season. Let's move on to Duke, who's looked really good at 7-0 in the ACC. That brings up an interesting point. Does Duke go over their regular season win total of 18.5? Remember, folks, when you look at college basketball, they play 20-game regular seasons. So when you look at Duke, they're at 7-0. If you look at the games that they have to go on the road in league where you think that they could get tripped up, right? There really isn't a lot of them. There's 2. There's Clemson, and there is at North Carolina at the end of the season. A lot of good teams come to them. Virginia, they're not the Virginia we think of. Miami, they're not the Miami you think of. Wake is down. BC's down. Syracuse is down. It's Clemson and the 2 games against North Carolina. They are going to go over 18.5 wins. That's why it's minus 188. But here's the caveat. Can they go undefeated at plus 230? I think they're going to do it. I think the way that Cooper Flagg has played, and now he's becoming so much more of a scorer, he's becoming a facilitator, getting you 4.1 assists per game, shoots at a high clip. Kneppel, Proctor, they have so much. Mason Gillis coming off the bench. I like Duke to go undefeated at plus 230. Coming up, we'll get to our scouting report where I preview the top matchups in the NBA and in college basketball. This is the Betting Above the Rim podcast. We'll be back after this commercial break. Welcome back to the Betting Above the Rim podcast, episode 114. And let's get into our scouting report where I preview the top games in college and the NBA. And let's lead off with a heavyweight matchup out east as Paolo Banchero's back in Indiana Pacers, look at me. The Orlando Magic take on Jason Tatum and the Boston Celtics. Lions are not out. This is a Friday night game. And to me, when I look at this matchup, there's a couple things that are kind of taking over my head here. And that's one, Celtics coming off of a really poor performance in their last matchup. This Boston team is starting to get a little flighty with me. I think their reliance on a three-point shot is tough. They lost 110-97 at Toronto. And they go and they're going to take over on a team in Orlando. To me, I think this game screams under, right? If you look at these teams with 2 of the better defensive teams, last game that they played, it was a 108-104 win by the Magic, so that's a 212. I think this game is probably going to be about a 215, 217 and a half. I would go under. I think this is a game where Boston is going to try and rely on their defense. Magic are very, 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 very good at defending the three-point line. And that's why I think this lines up. If you look at that first matchup, that 108-104 win by Orlando, Boston shot 8 of 33 from the three-point line at 24%, right? So if Orlando can hold that three-point line and make Boston bomb away, which they will, and they shoot at a poor clip, you could look at under. Look at under in that matchup between the Magic and the Celtics. Next up, big matchup with Minnesota as Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo head back to Gotham to take on Cat, if he plays, and the New York Knicks. And this Minnesota team, folks, is they're just not right. They're just not right. They're not playing well. They're going to be, coming, coming off a home loss, 116-115. That's 8-point favorites versus the Warriors, in which they tried to make a furious comeback. I look at this game as the Knicks minus a point. The Knicks are kind of flighty. They're up and down a little bit. They're 13-7 at home. They lost their last game at home versus Detroit. But I was on the second leg of a back-to-back. I expect a big win here. Give me the Knicks minus the points at home versus Minnesota. Let's head to the college game where Alabama takes on Kentucky. And folks, I see fireworks. If you look at Alabama's over-under average is 164. Kentucky's is 159.4. Folks, buckle up. You have two of the more dynamic offenses, two teams that shoot it extremely well from three, two teams that shoot it a lot from three, two teams that average over 88.5 points per game, both teams shooting at 47% from the floor or better. I think this game has over. I can see both teams easily getting into the 80s. So as long as that number is at about 160, go ahead and look at over in Alabama, Kentucky. Last game, Creighton versus UConn. Creighton has been a flighty team. They have not played well versus a UConn team. I mean, a UConn team that needs to be a little bit better and more consistent here. I can't trust Creighton, especially after they lost Pop Isaac. I know they had their big win, but that was at home versus Kansas. Give me UConn minus the points and a really tight game. Speaking of UConn and Blue Bloods, let's do our buzzer beater on Indiana. Indiana has had a rough couple of games, and I went on with Scotty Farrell to talk about Indiana, and I thought they were going to win this game against Illinois. Folks, it wasn't even close. They were down 28 at the break, lost 94-69. That comes off the loss of 25 points versus Iowa. I want college athletic directors and presidents to be careful about hiring guys from the school. It hasn't worked. Patrick Ewing didn't work. Chris Mullen didn't work. Adrian Autry may not work. Hubert Davis, besides the Final Four, has that worked, right? You can go up and down the line of former players going back to schools and it not working. This is Hoosier land. Fire Mike Woodson. You should have did so last week. Now you cost yourself. This has been your Betting Around the Rim podcast for all things sports gambling. Download that Sports Grid app. Pre-game, in-game, post-game, props, predictions, and more from the very best in the sports gambling industry. For my producer, Maddie George, who always does a great job, and Vinny, who kills it with the graphics, this is Coach Young. Remember, folks, it's smarter to be on Sports Grid. Good night.